coming up on the 20-year anniversary. 20 years later, what do you think is most important for people to reflect on?
For me, the reflecting on the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 is a pretty important moment. For me, it reflects the family and how important life is, because it obviously is so vulnerable, and it really is embraced in the last 20 years. I've really embraced the family as far as how much we spend the time together and everything else, but more importantly, how we work together as far as a society. 9/11 was a dramatic impact on all of our lives. Every one of us that were aware of that situation back then. There's so many people that were just born since then, but the impact of watching that video on TV of the towers actually collapsing was a memory I'll never forget, and it's something that's etched in my mind every time that we come into an anniversary like this, especially a 20-year anniversary. But it's really important to kind of just embrace it and remember what it meant to all of us and what it means to us as our families too.
I think for me, on the sense of literally every time we start coming up on the day, start thinking back to what happened. For me, one of the biggest things is not missing the opportunity, realizing from that event that at any moment things can go away. And even though that's what we've always learned on our job and our career, but seeing it at that level on that day. So every time I look back, it always reminds me, take that moment, spend time, be nice, give people, be patient, things like that, because you never know what the rest of us are going through, what they're going through, and at any given moment you may have missed an opportunity to help someone.
And maybe you could walk us through your personal experiences responding to 9/11, when it happened, going to Ground Zero and being deployed there.
When we were first watched the towers collapse, many of us contacted our urban search and rescue unit to see if this was a possibility that we could actually be deployed to 9/11, because at that time we had done a lot of training with our urban search and rescue team, but we had never really been on an actual deployment anywhere near that magnitude, obviously. So it was, all of us were very anxious to find out if we were actually going to be deployed. And then when we basically were getting the call out that, yeah, we're going to be going to this, it was actually a horrific feeling, but also exciting, because we knew that we were going to be part of something so big. And when we were all together at 88th in Sherman Oaks, where we actually pick up all of our equipment, it was just kind of a sobering moment to kind of think, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And to know that we were actually going to be deployed on the night of September 11th, we were very optimistic that we were actually going to possibly be able to save people, to be able to be on an incident that early on. So we were optimistic that we were going to be doing a lot of good. And our experiences as we traveled through, we realized that we weren't going to be saving a lot of people when we finally got there. But the point of us getting there and the experiences that we gained, we feel very fortunate that we had that opportunity to be there.
So for me, it was the morning of it was my last day. Was my morning to go home. I had been at work for 6 days already, and that morning I was supposed to be going home. And one of the guys in the dorm that I'm in comes busting in, waking me up, telling me that, just yelling that this thing had just happened. So I'm in a fog, and I go into the kitchen just in time to see the second plane hit. And then immediately in my head, you know, I'd been on the team since we started, which was like 93. Just that previous year, we had done a mobilization exercise of the whole team up to Sunnyvale. So we had some, albeit not a deployment, but some sets and reps as far as how we do things and what the process is. But immediately my mindset was, what's going to happen here? So I started, at the time I was a staff assistant, what they call emergency incident technicians now. I drove the battalion chief. So I started looking for a Suburban, loading up a Suburban. I knew the off-going shift wasn't going home, and I started thinking about here. And then the chief that was working that day goes, you guys are going, just leave. Like, nope, there's a process. We have a process. And eventually they pulled the trigger. I ended out at 88's out in Sherman Oaks, and it was on from there. And everything from that point for a couple of days was a blur. It was move, this, that. Matter of fact, I even remember at some point I went back to my truck in the parking lot and it was still running. I had never shut it off when I got there. I just went to work. So just little small things like that pop up, and that was it.
And can you walk us through just sort of the timeline and the nuts and bolts of how long you were there and what exactly you did?
So they pulled the trigger and activated the teams on 9/11 later that afternoon. We flew out of March Air Force Base in Riverside. We flew on C-141s. It was us, San Diego, and Riverside. So there's 28 of these special, at the time 27. There's now 28 of these special teams in the country. California has 8 of them, of the 28. So Riverside, San Diego, and us all got on loaded up at March Air Force Base together. By then it was like 2 a.m. or something like that. It was really early in the morning. Load up, fly, land at McGuire Air Force Base. I forget the time, but it was daylight. Got loaded up with moved over to Fort Dix to kind of rehab a little bit. Got us some vehicles that could take all of our equipment, because we take literally it's a couple of $1 million worth of equipment. It's like 64,000 pounds. We take a lot of stuff to be self-sufficient for 14 days. So we need vehicles now that we flew to get it. So that had to occur. We finally got into to Ground Zero, into the city later on the 12th, and we actually had a recon team out early in the morning on the 13th working. So that was, I don't have specific times, but that's kind of how it went.
So when we first got there, we were stationed at Jarvis Convention Center. That's where was our base of operations that we worked out of. And the first night that we were actually deployed into the actual trade center itself, I remember specifically it was a nighttime and we were deploying into it. And we were on all of our vehicles and we were literally stuck in traffic to get to the actual trade centers themselves. Not normal traffic. This was traffic of emergency vehicles, all emergency vehicles, rescue ambulances, fire engines, all just trying to get to the actual trade center itself. And what really etched in my mind was the thousands and thousands of people that were lined up on the sidewalk. And not only were they just crying, but they were also holding up little American flags and cheering of how many people were there to help their city and the community itself. And it was something that I'll always remember, the how people came together that day. And actually, as hurtful as it was, as devastating as it was, they were there to cheer us on, to see if we could do the best we possibly could.
So on the 13th, you guys went to the World Trade Center and you were engaged in search and rescue. So presumably you were searching for survivors through the rubble and remains?
Yes. Yeah, so there's 2 phases. Obviously we started in the rescue phase. We were assigned to what's called the West Sector, which is basically south, the furthest most southern western portion of the collapse zone. And when we do searches, it's a methodical, we start with the dogs, they get a hit, we confirm and continue on like that. So, and then we do delayering and things like that. So as we're working these areas and searching these void spaces, we did what's called a blitz. At the time, the team was 66 people, and normally we split half and half, AM flight, PM flight. But for that first shift, we did a full team blitz for the whole first almost 48 hours of a full team blitz, and then we went into the cycles of stuff. So it was just that team and working alongside everyone else, alongside the FDNY firefighters, alongside other USAR teams that were there, just working this area and coordinating with each other to do the best we could.
What was that like personally, though? I mean, here you are responding to this national horror of a scope that this nation had never seen. There's the personal horror of all of these families that are desperate for answers about their loved ones. And there you are. You say you were realizing we thought we were going to save a lot of lives. And then we're there finding out that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, my position when we were deployed there is a technical search specialist. So I actually have the search cam that could get into void spaces and try to find possible life in any areas where there might be a void that they might be able to survive. But in the very beginning, when we first started actually working on the areas, many of the members from the FDNY were in bucket brigades and just trying to remove debris to try to find their comrades as well as anybody else that they could possibly find out there. And in the beginning, it was trying to develop a relationship with the existing firefighters that were there working hard and all of the technical specialists that were trying to come in that had some specialized equipment. And in the very beginning, we actually just started working the bucket brigade with them. And that actually helped develop the trust that we were there to support and help them. And when we were starting to work with some of our search canines, our search dogs, and we were actually starting to find some of the bodies that were right next to the lines of these bucket brigades, then it started developing that relationship that we're there to help and that we're there. And like you said, the emotions of what they were going, most of them knew the people that were trapped or buried underneath that debris. So it was very, very emotional for the fire department to try to find their comrades there. And so for us to try to come in and not take over, but to work together, and that collaboration has been, still exists. We still have friendships from some of the members that we met out there. But the canines are what actually helped break that relationship and form that bond that helped us work together.
For people in high school and younger, they never lived through this. They don't have that moment that I think we probably all have where we know exactly where we were when we saw those Twin Towers go down. How you were there on the ground seeing that wreckage firsthand that had to be devastating. Maybe you could describe sort of the most important things for people to know about the horror, people that didn't live through this and don't know firsthand how important it is to keep those images and the scale of how devastating this was, top of mind.
Start off.
It's funny for me because I think I look more at if you can find the positive side to it, which is all these people that didn't know each other coming together to help, working side by side, that forever that bond will be there. I mean, to this day in the system that we work in, there's still people, as Chief Hissong had mentioned, that I deal with on a regular basis that we were there together. And even beforehand, that team was one of the 28 teams at the time, or 27 teams. And knowing people that we had trained with. So knowing that and telling folks, again, yes, this was tragic, but from this came this commitment, this partnership, this brotherhood, for lack of a better term, of us joining together and helping each other, despite the differences in everybody, despite all these different things. None of those things mattered. We all came together, we helped, and that's what we need to focus on moving forward and remembering.
Yeah, my sons were very, very young and didn't really understand what I was doing when I left for the deployment. As they grew up, they knew and understood that how important it was for me to be there. And as I talked to many people that were not alive during that time, which 20 years, the element of just recognizing, like Bubba said, that the devastation of what this was to not just our nation but the world, how traumatic it was, and that we're still vulnerable. Something like this could possibly happen again, and how we have to come together as a bond, as a nation, because I think it's one of those things that's what pulled us together, to not only be able to be there mentally and physically, but to be able to support each other, people that we don't even know that we're there to support. And that element is what helped get us through it. And that is the reason why, if nothing else, today I think we're a stronger nation because of 9/11. The elements of the emotions that go along with it, we have to recognize it. And that's why it's important for a day like today to recognize it, to remember it, because it should resonate with all of us that we are vulnerable, that we are a nation of one, and we should be together as one nation too.
And then I'm wondering if personally, 20 years later, there are still specific sights or moments or sounds or smells that stick with you, the things that you dream about or that you've had to work through to cope with, because you guys experience this so personally.
Yeah, for me, it's my job is on the deployment is I work in the plan section. We take the orders that are given to us and the objectives and write up a tactical plan, working with the other people on the team on how we're going to do this, how we're going to meet those objectives. And then once we go to work, the planning section maintains the situation awareness and the resource tracker, which means lots of documentation, lots of pictures. I've looked at tons and taken tons of pictures, and to this day they're there. They're in my head, whatever. And it was up until October 2015 when I finally got a chance to go back to Ground Zero. And it was a fortunate chance because I was actually there teaching a class, and I got a tour from some two NYPD buddies, and we did a walkthrough, and it was like, okay, now the slides are different. The slides in my head are a little bit different. And then I went back a couple of years ago for a meeting, and we went back to all the places that we were at. When we get deployed, we have what's called a base of operation at the Javits Center, and then we had a forward base of operation at Carlisle and West. Still remember the intersection to this day. At Carlisle and West, and a couple years ago I had a chance to go back in that building. It was an apartment building, and we were in the garage area, and when I went into the lobby and I'm talking to the manager or the guy in the lobby, and I'm showing him pictures on my phone from us working in there, he's like, that was here? He didn't even know that his building was a base for this USAR team that was doing work in the area, stuff like that. So little things like that to change the slide. And also it's like, here's a guy in the building in the city that it happened in and had no clue that that building was like a base for rescue operations. So,
and when you say change the slide, you mean replace, a very horrifying image with something a little more reflective and healing?
Yes. Yeah. Like this looks like the like, for example, in front of the tin house, the fire station tin house where everything came right up to it, there's this visual of the pile right up to the building, and we were there working and setting up, helping New York with their command post, things like that, and just seeing the smell of the diesel, the smell of things burning, the smell of just stuff, eventually of food rotting, things like that. And then being back in that spot and it not being that, and it being clean and the color, because back then it was all one color, just this grayish, tan, whatever color. Now there's color there, and to be in front of this house that was the first response. They were the first team to the incident. So just stuff like that.
Yeah, when we first was going from our forward base of operations into the actual towers themselves, as Bubba mentioned, the street that we walked down was about a 2-block area that we would walk into the actual tower. And the first night that we were there, like he said, it was dark, but everything was the same shade of gray. There were cars, there were the buildings, but everything was the same shade of gray because of the actual dust. And in the windows, some people had etched in the windows, we're looking for so-and-so, we're looking for names, peoples. And along with that were the pictures. So all around the outskirts of the areas were pictures of people that had posted their family, their loved ones that they were looking for. And that's what kind of made it real for us as we're searching the pile. At first you're thinking we're just searching for a person, but the pictures all around it made it real.
Yes.
It made the emotions of what we were looking for were those people that we're seeing that are posted all over the outskirts of the trade center. So for me, when I look at pictures of a missing person, it sparks that memory. It sparks that memory of seeing the hundreds and hundreds of people that were posting their pictures of their family members. I look forward in 2 more years to going out to the Trade Center and actually looking at the museum. I think that's going to be my way of bringing that closure to it. Not that I don't have closure now. I think I embrace it by being here at the training center and being part of being very fortunate to have parts of the World Trade Center here at our Trade Center, that every year we get an opportunity to actually memorialize it and celebrate it. But to actually be at New York again, to be part of the museum and see it again, that will help kind of bring it all to a close.
So you haven't been back yet to New York?
I went back probably 3 years after the collapse, and at that time the museum wasn't built or anything yet. But I look forward to being able to go visit the museum.
And just one point for clarity: how long were you guys deployed there? Responding to
14
Yeah,
days.
14 days.
14 days we were deployed.
Are other people in line to ask questions? I feel like I'm. Okay, well, thank you, but I'm happy to step aside and let some other people ask questions.
No, no, not at all.
No, I think we think about it, but I think the training that we do is what helps us bring it together and bring our emotions. That we're there to help people and we're there to do the best that we can. So we don't necessarily have nightmares. At least myself, I don't have nightmares in that sense. I actually have positive thoughts that we were there to actually do some good. One of the things that was frustrating for our team a little bit is when we were early on, we were thinking we were going to be there to save people, and because we were there so early, and to be there for multiple days, and we weren't finding anybody alive, but we were finding some of the bodies that were lost. It actually helped us come together as a team to try to talk about it, and although there was frustrations that we weren't finding anybody, we came together as a team saying that everyone in the nation wants to be here, and we're the fortunate people that were actually to be there. So us just being there was part of a support system for the nation. So that made it even more important of what our job there was doing too.
And Chris Holmstrom here, thank you so much for joining us. So take us back to going there, 2 days after the attacks happened. From a personal level, what was going on through your mind when you actually made it to ground zero? I mean, obviously your job is search and rescue, but from a personal point of view, I'm sure you had to have different thoughts. Explain to me what was going on through your head and what you were seeing.
I can speak. So for me, it's like, it's game on. And what I mean by that is literally the minute they pull the trigger to get in, I think the only time I really took a moment to think, and somebody sent me the picture not too long ago, is I'm in the airplane. I was one of the fortunate ones that was in one of the planes that didn't have all the equipment, so we had room. Because if you've ever been in a military cargo plane, there's not a lot of room. So we were fortunate, and there's a picture of me just sitting there, and I'm like this. And I tried to go back, and I must have been thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Because we're always looking downrange. There's the moment, and then downrange. And I'm trying to think in between those two spaces. So really personal-wise, I was not married yet, about to get married, didn't have any kids. My life was different than most, you know what I mean, as opposed to, it's all about optics. So for me, it was all about the mission. And then once I had a moment to check in, because I know they're worried, the family back home, check in, let everybody know. But for the most part, it's mission on, and because it's literally, just to paint a picture for you on a deployment where we're actively working in a 24-hour period, the plan shop, my shop, might get 3-4 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period, and that's even with 12-hour ops. If we were on 24 ops, it's less than that. So it's just constant whatever. As we went on, there's more. Now we're in the mode, we're in a system. Now I can think about stuff, and again, it's thinking back and just letting everybody know that we're okay, that we're doing what we can do. Because even not a whole lot of social media back then, so there's not as much rumor control, but they still worry about you. My mom's still worried about me regularly. So.
How about you? Were you
when we were deployed and we were actually responding in to where the actual trade center is, we could still see a lot of the smoke. There was a lot of areas that were still on fire that were burning deep down. So there was still a lot of smoke in the air. So it was kind of that questions of unknowns. What is it our assignment going to be? We knew we were there with multiple urban search and rescue teams, but what are our assignments going to be? What are we going to be able to do? And optimistically thinking that we were still going to be able to do a lot of really good stuff as far as the search and rescue went. So it was the unknowns. We had all seen it on TV, the devastation of those trade centers, the actually collapsing, and knowing what that looked like on the television is so much different than when you first arrive and actually see it firsthand. It was so much larger of an area. The impact zone was so much larger than what we envisioned on the actual television. There was so many surrounding buildings that were collateral impacts because of the actual trade centers. So it was just trying to get the game plan, like Bubba's talking about, is figuring out what our game plan is that we're going to do. What are the areas? What's the areas that we're going to grid out and search and know how to do it and work within the actual folks that are assigned to the incident itself, the FDNY, and being able to work together with them. And it was the optimism knowing that we're going to be able to try to find a lot of areas, thinking that they were void areas. There were subway systems down below, so we're very optimistic that we were going to be able to maybe find people still trapped in those areas. So those were the kind of things that were still going on our mind. We're very task-oriented when we respond to whether it's incidents here in the city, and especially on the deployment. We look back at all of our training, and we've done so much training within our disciplines, like mine was the technical search. So our training that we've done for so many years, we're looking forward to actually applying those skill sets and really being able to do what we have been trained for so many years. So those were really the things. It's the task mindset of really trying to think about how are we going to apply the training we've done for so many years.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of people were missing after the towers collapsed. Did you guys come into contact with anyone that was still alive?
I did not.
No, every victim that we found was deceased. One in particular that I still was the guy there was a guy in a delivery van that we recovered, and it was a process. And just remembering that, and the ID card, and just all the things that you found. But then sitting down and talking with each other and realizing what we were creating was closure for those families. So yeah, as important as it would have been, and great, perfect world to have done rescues or affected some rescues, the fact that we did create closure, because a lot of people still didn't get their closure. So that was some of the stuff that we took. And everybody on the team, we go through, everyone on the team has gone through critical incident stress management training, everybody on the team. So we counsel each other, we do we debrief at the end of every op, we get together. So that's kind of how we manage a lot of that, so that it doesn't become an overwhelming issue.
One of the things that was a surprise to me is the majority of our training we've done to prepare for earthquakes, hurricanes, along those lines of what we train for. One of the things that was a surprise to me when we got to the World Trade Center is here you have two high-rise buildings that were incredibly tall, and you just think about how much furniture and desks and things are in a single floor of any building. Those trade centers, when they came down, there was no furniture, no computers, no anything. Everything was just completely pulverized. There was the dust. And that was something that really was a surprise to me, to think that there was nothing left. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the people too. Is just the pulverization of it. There was nothing left. And that was a surprise to me. I wasn't really prepared for not having to see a collapse zone with still all the furniture, but it wasn't. There was nothing left.
You know, obviously there's a lot of victims' families out there still, and for those who watch the stories that'll be airing tonight, and you know, all the publications, what would you like to tell the victim's family 20 years later?
I think the most important thing that we could convey is that when we as a nation come together, we're there to support, to be able to provide that helping hand, and know that we as a nation came together for everybody. And sadly, how many people lost their family members, but they are a moment of history too. That is something that all of us can relate to, is that moment of history is something that we all shared. And it's so sad that we've lost so many people, because it wasn't just the people that we've lost at the Trade Center when they collapsed. It's all the subsequent people we have lost because of respiratory or cancers and things that have gone along with it. So all of us have been impacted in so many ways. And I think the one thing that we should all take away from it is how we all help each other heal. And that is embracing us together is what helps us move forward and get through it.
And for me, I tell them, just know that we did and worked alongside some of the best people around, and worked as hard as we could to do the best we could for them and their families.
20 years later, how are you two doing? I mean, obviously, still an experience, a memory, a traumatic experience that you'll always remember. And, 20 years, you see the faces, the people, and those are people that, you help recover and rescue. And, I mean, obviously, still emotional. We're all human. How are you guys doing 20 years later?
It's funny for me because I don't like these. I don't like interviews. But and every time it would come up, the anniversary would come up, it was always, hey Bubba, and I would be like, no, I don't want to, and then I would have to. I would get told to, not this time though. And to that point, for this one, it is different. It does feel different for me. I'm not as in the past. No joke. I've done interviews. I did interviews with the deal with Chuck Henry and stuff like that, and I cried because it hit me. And it's not that I'm not as sensitive about it now. I think it's just I'm older. I'm a little bit. I have a bigger picture about things. I tend to look at, again, I try and look at the good that we did, if you can find any ounce of that. So for me, that's the biggest thing. I think over time now it has gotten a little bit better, but at the same time, and to Chief Hissong's point, we did lose a member of our team last year. Tom Bureau, one of our, he was our safety officer on our team, and he was battalion chief on our job, passed away from World Trade Center related cancer, and that one hit me because he was a longtime friend and mentor all the way back to my explorer days on the fire department in '81 before I got hired in '86. So that brought it back personal and home, to know that, and because it is a fear. I mean, I do. There's a thing called the World Trade Center Medical Program, and I'm a part of it, and I get a comprehensive medical every year to get screened. So far, so good, but still scary stuff. So, but anyway, that's the part that I think that still sits in my head about the memories, is where are we at now and how are we going to do health-wise.
I think we've learned to embrace the opportunity to tell the story, and we appreciate these moments and this way of being able to share our experiences so we can help other people know it, understand it, and remember it. These are the small moments that we have an opportunity to be able to express that. As Bubba said, many of us have had some sort of type of medical ailments. Myself, I have respiratory infection that goes into an instant respiratory infection no matter what, and I never had any of that beforehand. But it's one of those things also, it's a memory when it happens, it's a scar, and that scar helps me remember that we were there to help, and the opportunity to help as many people as we possibly could.
And I'm told there's a piece of the World Trade Center here at this facility. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys got that, what it means when you see that, and explain that a little bit?
The piece that you see here at the Trade Center is the trident. It's one of the largest pieces of the World Trade Center this side of the Mississippi. That was actually brought in by volunteers and people that have donated the monies to actually bring that out. And we planted it here at the training center, our fire department training center, and it means so much to us to have that, because every year we get the opportunity to come together, share our stories, and celebrate not only the fire departments from our fire department, but other fire departments all over, and the police department within the city family. We get that opportunity to share it, and it's something that reminds me every morning when I drive into this training center to see that piece, and it actually brings a smile to my face that we are honored to have that size of a piece as a memorial to the World Trade Center.
Yeah, our training center, our home-based training center out in Sherman Oaks has a piece and a fountain out front as well. Not as big as the Trident, but it also has a piece of the Pentagon, because there were 3 places that day. But for us, having it in front of our training center, where all of this, our team and then the 6 local teams that we have do all of their training, is a big reminder. It's like every time I pull in that gate, this is why we do this here, and why we do what we do. So.
Anybody else have any other questions? Anything else you want people to know if they're at home watching this?
Oh, anything?
No, I think you said it. It's there's nothing. Every time we come around these, we were fortunate enough to be in a position to go and help, and it's no different than the millions of people across the country that wanted to do the same thing. We were just fortunate enough to be in a position where we were able to. So, for that, I do feel blessed, that we were able to, and I only hope that the closure that we did create for the families did bring them some comfort.
Yeah, likewise. We look at our training that we've done and all of the preparation, and to actually be able to be the fortunate ones to actually be on the boots on the ground at the Trade Center really is truly an honor as we look back and reflect on it. And although we may not have found anybody, but we brought closure to a lot. And for that opportunity, we are truly honored to be part of that.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Marissa, iHeartRadio and NBC News KCAA. And I just wanted to say thank you for what you did there. I know you had to, but it still is, breaks my heart open just remembering. And also, you've really brought the positive out. So is there a part of you that hits an angry nerve when you remember? And then the second part is the families or people that you have met who lost someone. What's the best way to comfort them?
I don't necessarily have anger. I just know that I feel vulnerable that what happened to the Trade Center could still happen to us in some other way or shape or form. So I don't have anger towards it. I feel that I want to always know and be aware of our situation, of how things are happening. As far as the families, we really, again, want to convey how much support they have as a nation, because the reason that we tell these stories are to share our experiences that were true to us, but more importantly to the families that lost their family members there, that we came together. And no matter where anybody was, it was the only thing that we thought about during that time period. And that part of it was the support that we were all working together to accomplish a single goal, and that was to bring everybody together as a nation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Anita Bennett from BNC Network. I missed the top. How many of you from this unit went?
So at the time, the team was a 66-member team, made up of, for the most part, all LA City firefighters, with the exception of the two doctors. The two doctors are civilians. However, one of the doctors was our fire department medical director, so he was a fire department member. And then we had two members that were two of the canine handlers that were sworn firefighters, but with other agencies outside of LA.
I'm really curious, did any of the canines have any type of, you mentioned your colleagues, did any of the dogs have any type of health problems afterwards?
I don't think.
Yeah,
was it
actually they did.
Dorissa's
Dorissa's dog had some health issues afterwards because of obviously the dust that was still in the air, and the canines that were still searching all those areas. They did get affected by it, and unfortunately most of them have passed since then. And I know one of them specifically was directly related because of the World Trade Center.
All right, thank you.